The M4 carbine came apart in her hands like silk unraveling, each component falling into its designated space on the worn wooden table with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. Maya Chen's fingers moved without conscious thought, muscle, memory guiding each twist, each slide, each careful separation of metal and polymer. The fluorescent lights of the armory cast harsh shadows across her face, but her dark eyes remained focused, unwavering, as if the weapon before her held secrets only she could unlock. "Faster," she whispered to herself, the word barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system. It was 0347 hours, and the USS Leviathan moved through Pacific waters with the steady rhythm of a sleeping giant. Most of the crew was either on watch or lost in dreams of home, but Maya had been here for 3 hours already, her shift having ended at midnight. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford not when perfection demanded everything she had to give. The disassembly was complete in 43 seconds. She knew because she always counted, always measured, always pushed herself beyond what anyone expected from a petty officer third class, whose official duty was weapons maintenance. The Navy had trained her to clean, inspect, and repair small arms. They had not trained her for the obsession that consumed her nights, the driving need to understand every mechanical symphony these instruments could play. "Jesus, Chun, you're at it again?" The voice belonged to Petty Officer Marcus Rivera, her closest friend aboard the ship, and the only person who understood why she tortured herself with these midnight sessions. He emerged from the shadows near the armory entrance, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee that smelled like salvation in the recycled air of the ship's depths. "Couldn't sleep," Maya replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Her hands, steady as granite moments before, trembled slightly as she wrapped them around the warm ceramic. "The new batch of M249s came in yesterday. Something's off with the gas systems on 3 of them." Marcus settled onto a stool beside her workbench, his weathered face creased with concern. At 32, he was 8 years her senior and had taken her under his wing when she'd arrived on the Leviathan 18 months ago. A scared 22-year-old from Sacramento who'd joined the Navy to escape a life that seemed determined to crush her before she'd even lived it. "The armorer already cleared those weapons for service," he said gently. "Chief Kowalski ran diagnostics on all of them yesterday afternoon." Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She respected Chief Kowalski, truly she did, but his diagnostics were surface level at best. He checked function, verified proper operation, ensured the weapons would fire when needed. Maya went deeper. She listened to the whispered complaints of springs under tension, felt the microscopic irregularities in metal surfaces that spoke of manufacturing flaws or were patterns that would lead to failures down the line. The gas port on serial number 7743 is 0.3 millimeters off spec. She sighed, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of absolute certainty. "It'll cause pressure irregularities that won't show up under normal testing conditions, but in sustained fire situations, especially in high-temperature environments, you'll see a 20% increase in failure to feed malfunctions." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head with the mixture of admiration and bewilderment she'd grown accustomed to. "How the hell do you even measure something like that? We don't have equipment that precise in this armory." She didn't answer immediately, instead beginning the reassembly process. The M4 came together in her hands like a puzzle solved 1,000 times before, each piece finding its home with mechanical certainty. Bolt carrier group slides home. Charging handle snaps into place. Buffer and spring compress with their familiar whisper of coiled tension. Upper and lower receivers mate with the satisfying click that never failed to send a small thrill of completion through her chest. "I can feel it," she said finally, her words barely audible. "In the way the parts fit together, the resistance when pieces don't want to go where they should. It's like like listening to a song where one instrument is slightly out of tune. Most people can't hear it, but once you know what to listen for ... you're fucking terrifying, you know that? Marcus said, but his tone was filled with affection. In the best possible way. The reassembly was complete, 37 seconds. She'd shaved 6 seconds off her previous best time, but the improvement felt hollow. Speed was only meaningful if it served a purpose, and lately, Maya had begun to wonder what purpose her obsession truly served. She was the fastest weapons tech on the ship, possibly in the fleet, but her talents were wasted on routine maintenance and quarterly inspections. The armory around them told the story of the Leviathan's mission with silent efficiency. Racks of M4 carbines stood in perfect rows, each weapon tagged and cataloged, ready to arm the ship's marine detachment at a moment's notice. M249 squad automatic weapons occupied their own section, their longer barrels and bipods giving them a predatory appearance in the stark lighting. Pistols, shotguns, and crew-served weapons filled the remaining spaces, creating a museum of controlled violence that Maya had come to think of as home. But tonight, something felt different. The familiar comfort of the armory's ordered chaos couldn't quiet the restlessness that had been building in her chest for weeks. She was 24 years old, had been in the Navy for 6 years, and felt trapped in a role that utilized perhaps 10% of her capabilities. The weapons called to her, not as instruments of destruction, but as mechanical puzzles that deserved to be understood completely, operated flawlessly, maintained with a level of care that bordered on reverence. "Rivera-chun, what are you two doing in here?" The voice cut through the armory like a blade, sharp with authority and barely concealed irritation. Command Master Chief Patricia Hawkins stood in the doorway, her uniform immaculate despite the early hour, her gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun that could have been sculpted from steel. At 53, she was a legend in the Navy's small arms community, a woman who had climbed from seaman recruit to the highest enlisted rank through sheer determination and an encyclopedic knowledge of weapons systems. "Voluntary maintenance." "Master Chief," Marcus replied, standing at attention. Maya followed suit, her coffee cup abandoned on the workbench. Petty Officer Chun was conducting additional diagnostics on the new weapons. Hawkins's pale blue eyes swept over the disassembled and reassembled M4, taking in every detail with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been evaluating weapons and warriors for 3 decades. Her gaze lingered on Maya's hands, noting the faint oil stains that no amount of scrubbing could completely remove, the small calluses that spoke of thousands of hours spent manipulating metal and springs. "Additional diagnostics," she repeated, her tone neutral. "On weapons that have already been cleared for service." "Yes, Master Chief," Maya said, meeting the older woman's gaze directly. She had learned early in her career that respect was earned through competence, not deference, and Hawkins was one of the few senior enlisted who appreciated directness over diplomatic dancing. "Show me." The 2 words carried the weight of command, but also something else: curiosity, perhaps, or professional interest. Hawkins moved closer to the workbench, her movements precise and economical. Maya felt her pulse quicken, not from fear, but from the sudden realization that this moment might be important in ways she couldn't yet understand. Maya selected one of the M249 squad automatic weapons from the rack, the weapon that had kept her awake with its mechanical imperfections. She placed it on the workbench and began the disassembly process, her movements smooth and controlled. Hawkins watched in silence as the weapon came apart with practiced efficiency, each component laid out in the precise order that would facilitate the fastest possible reassembly. "The gas system," Maya began, her voice steady despite the intensity of the Master Chief's attention. "The port diameter on this weapon is outside specifications. Not enough to fail initial inspection, but sufficient to cause operational problems under stress conditions." She lifted the gas tube, holding it up to the light. Additionally, the buffer spring has been compressed beyond optimal parameters, probably during shipping. It'll function normally for now, but reliability will degrade rapidly once you reach sustained fire rates above 200 rounds per minute. Hawkins accepted the gas tube, examining it with the same focused attention Maya had applied moments before. Her fingers, weathered by decades of handling weapons, moved over the metal surface with practiced expertise. After several minutes of silent examination, she set the component down and fixed Maya with a stare that seemed to peer directly into her soul. "How long did that disassembly take?" she asked. 97 seconds, Master Chief." "And how fast? Can you put it back together?" Maya felt something shift in the armory's atmosphere, as if the air itself had become charged with possibility. This wasn't routine anymore. This was an evaluation, though for what purpose remained unclear. 82 seconds is my current best time for the M249, she replied. "Show me." What happened next would be discussed in hushed tones throughout the fleet for years to come. Maya's hands moved across the weapon components with fluid grace, each piece flowing into position as if guided by invisible forces. The bolt moved into the bolt carrier. The operating rod slid home with mechanical precision. Springs compressed, pins aligned, assemblies mated with the satisfying clicks and snaps that spoke of proper fit and function. Hawkins watched with the intensity of a hawk studying prey, her eyes tracking every movement, every decision, every micro-hesitation that might reveal weakness or uncertainty. But there was no uncertainty in Maya's movements, only the pure expression of muscle memory, refined through countless hours of repetition and an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that bordered on the supernatural. The weapon was whole again in 79 seconds. Maya had broken her personal record under the scrutiny of the most senior enlisted sailor on the ship, and the realization sent a surge of adrenaline through her system that was better than any drug. "Holy shit," Marcus whispered, then immediately looked mortified at his breach of protocol in front of the Master Chief. But Hawkins wasn't paying attention to Marcus. Her focus remained locked on Maya, and for the first time since entering the armory, her expression had shifted from professional interest to something approaching amazement. "Petty Officer Chen," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I have been working with weapons and training sailors for 31 years. I have seen Marines who can field strip an M4 blindfolded, SEALs who can reassemble a machine gun underwater, and Special Forces operators who treat their weapons like extensions of their own bodies." She paused, letting the weight of her experience settle over the armory like a blanket. "What you just did, I've never seen anything like it." Maya felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. Compliments from senior personnel always made her uncomfortable, partly because she'd learned not to trust praise that came too easily, and partly because she genuinely didn't understand what made her ability seem so extraordinary to others. To her, the weapons simply made sense. Their mechanical logic was as clear as mathematics, as predictable as physics, as reliable as the sunrise. "Master Chief," she began, but Hawkins held up a hand to silence her. "There's a delegation coming aboard tomorrow," the older woman said, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing classified information. "Congressional Oversight Committee, couple of flag officers, and a team from Naval Special Warfare, Group 1. They're conducting an assessment of fleet readiness and training effectiveness." She paused, studying Maya's face for any reaction. "They're specifically interested in small arms proficiency across different specialties." The implication hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Maya felt her heart rate increase, not from nervousness but from something that might have been excitement. For 6 years, she had perfected her skills in isolation, pushing herself to levels of expertise that served no apparent purpose beyond her own satisfaction. Now perhaps that obsession might finally have meaning. "I want you to demonstrate your abilities for the delegation," Hawkins continued. Show them what's possible when someone truly understands these weapon systems. Master Chief, I'm just a maintainer, Maya protested, though even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. She had transcended the role of maintainer long ago, evolving into something the Navy didn't have a classification for, an artist whose medium happened to be weapons of war. No, Hawkins said firmly. You're not just anything. You're an asset. This Navy doesn't know it has, and tomorrow you're going to prove it. As the Master Chief turned to leave, Maya felt the weight of impending change settle over her like an invisible cloak. Tomorrow would bring questions she couldn't answer, expectations she wasn't sure she could meet, and attention she had never sought. But tonight, in the familiar sanctuary of the armory surrounded by the tools of her obsession, she allowed herself a moment of anticipation. The M249 lay before her on the workbench, reassembled and perfect, its mechanical systems harmonizing in ways that only she seemed to fully appreciate. In 18 hours, strangers would watch her work and judge her abilities by standards she didn't understand. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her smile. Maya's alarm sounded at 0500, though she had been awake for the past 47 minutes, staring at the bottom of the rack above her while her mind raced through weapon configurations and assembly sequences. Sleep had become a stranger to her over the years, chased away by the constant need to improve, to perfect, to push beyond the boundaries that others accepted as immutable. The berthing compartment around her was filled with the soft sounds of sleeping sailors' gentle snores, the rustle of sheets, the occasional whispered word from someone lost in dreams of home. She slipped from her rack with practiced silence, gathering her shower kit and uniform in movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. The ship's corridors were dimly lit in their night configuration, red lighting preserving the night vision of those on watch while allowing essential movement through the vessel's arteries. Maya had walked these passages thousands of times, her feet finding their way automatically while her mind remained focused on the day ahead. The shower was a brief ritual of scalding water and harsh soap, the kind of functional cleansing that military life demanded. But as she stood under the spray, Maya allowed herself a moment of vulnerability that she rarely acknowledged. Today felt different, charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. For 6 years, she had hidden her obsession behind the facade of dutiful service, content to be seen as nothing more than an exceptionally thorough maintainer. Now that carefully constructed anonymity was about to be stripped away, her daily routine began, as it always did, in the armory. The space felt different in the pre-dawn hours, less like a workshop and more like a cathedral dedicated to precision and mechanical perfection. Maya moved through her assigned tasks with automatic efficiency daily inspections, maintenance logs, ammunition counts, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation with Master Chief Hawkins and trying to imagine what the day would bring. You're up early, even for you. Maya turned to find Petty Officer Second Class Jennifer Torres entering the armory, coffee cup in hand and a knowing smile on her face. Torres was one of the few people aboard who understood Maya's dedication, without feeling threatened by it. At 28, she was a weapons specialist herself, though her expertise lay more in training and instruction than the deep mechanical understanding that drove Maya's obsession. Couldn't sleep, Maya replied, continuing her inspection of a POSA rack of M4 carbines. Each weapon received the same meticulous attention trigger function, bolt movement, magazine seating, optics alignment. To an outside observer, it might have seemed excessive. Maya knew it was the minimum standard that perfection demanded. Heard you had a visit from the Master Chief last night, Torres said, settling onto her usual stool near the ammunition lockers. Marcus said she watched you work on one of the 249s. News traveled fast on a ship, especially when it involved unusual activities by senior personnel. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to elaborate without revealing more than she intended. The demonstration for the visiting delegation was supposed to be confidential, though she suspected Torres would learn about it soon enough. "Want to talk about what's eating you?" Torres asked, her tone gentle but persistent. "You've been wound tighter than a mainspring for weeks now." Maya paused in her inspection, considering how much to reveal. Torres had been a friend and mentor. Since Maya's arrival on the Leviathan, one of the few people who had never made her feel like her dedication was somehow abnormal or excessive. If anyone could understand the complex emotions churning through her mind, it would be Jennifer Torres. "I've been thinking about my career," Maya said finally. "Where I'm going, what I'm actually accomplishing here." She gestured around the armory, encompassing not just the physical space, but everything it represented: her role, her limitations, her growing sense of being underutilized in ways that the Navy's bureaucracy couldn't quantify. "You're one of the best weapons technicians in the fleet," Torres replied. "Your maintenance records are legendary. The weapons under your care have a failure rate that's statistically impossible." "But that's all I am," Maya said, and for the first time she heard the frustration in her own voice. "A technician. Someone who cleans and repairs and makes sure other people's weapons work properly. I joined the Navy to be more than that." Torres studied her carefully, recognizing something in Maya's tone that went beyond simple career dissatisfaction. "What did you think you'd become when you enlisted?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow, not because it was unexpected, but because she had never articulated the answer, even to herself. She had joined the Navy at 18, fleeing a life in Sacramento that had offered nothing but dead-end jobs and the slow suffocation of unfulfilled potential. Her parents had worked factory jobs their entire lives, saving every penny to give their daughter opportunities they had never had. Maya's mechanical aptitude had been apparent from childhood. She was the girl who fixed broken appliances, who understood how things worked simply by taking them apart and studying their components. "I thought I'd be someone who mattered," she said quietly. "Someone whose skills made a real difference, not just in maintaining equipment, but in, I don't know, something bigger." "Your skills do matter," Torres insisted. "Every weapon that functions flawlessly because of your attention to detail. Every malfunction you prevent before it happens, that matters to the people who depend on those weapons." Maya knew Torres was right, but the logical understanding couldn't quiet the restlessness that had been growing stronger each day. She was capable of so much more than routine maintenance, but the Navy's rigid structure offered no clear path for someone with her unique combination of skills and obsessions. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The morning progressed with its familiar rhythm. Marines arrived for weapons draws, their easy banter filling the armory with the kind of casual professionalism that Maya had learned to appreciate over the years. Staff Sergeant Williams, the Marine Detachment's senior NCO, paused at her workstation as he signed for his unit's assigned weapons. "Chun, I've been meaning to ask you something," he said, his voice carrying the respect that had developed over months of flawless service. "My Marines have been talking about weapon reliability rates, and your numbers are impossible. I mean literally impossible. The manufacturers don't claim reliability that high." Maya felt her cheeks warm with the familiar discomfort that came with recognition. "I just do my job, Staff Sergeant." "Bullshit," Williams replied, but his tone was friendly rather than confrontational. "I've been in the Corps for 15 years, worked with armorers all over the world. What you do isn't normal. It's better than normal." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "My question is, have you ever considered cross-training? The Corps could use someone with your talents in a more operational role." The offer hung in the air like smoke, tempting and dangerous. Maya had considered leaving the Navy's weapons maintenance community before, but the thought of starting over in a new specialty had always seemed too daunting. now with her growing dissatisfaction and the mysterious demonstration looming ahead. Williams's suggestion carried unexpected appeal. "I appreciate the offer, Staff Sergeant, but I'm Navy through and through," she replied. Though the words felt less certain than usual, Williams nodded, accepting her response without argument, but Maya caught the knowing look in his eyes. He understood the signs of someone whose current role had grown too small for their abilities. The afternoon brought the usual stream of routine tasks, but Maya found herself working with unusual intensity, as if each perfectly maintained weapon might somehow prove her worth to observers who weren't even present. She disassembled and cleaned weapons that were already spotless, adjusted sights that were already perfectly aligned, tested functions that had been tested countless times before. "You're going to wear those weapons out with all that attention," Marcus observed, finding her still working as the evening watch change approached. "Seriously, Chun, when's the last time you took a day off?" Maya paused in her work, trying to remember her last actual rest day. The truth was, she couldn't recall spending a full day away from the armory in months. Even when she wasn't officially on duty, she found excuses to check on her weapons, to perform additional maintenance, to lose herself in the mechanical meditation that had become both her refuge and her prison. "I don't need time off," she said automatically, the response that had become her default deflection. "Everyone needs time off," Marcus replied firmly. "You're burning yourself out, and it's starting to show. Torres is worried about you." "Hell, I'm worried about you." The concern in his voice was genuine, and Maya felt a stab of guilt for causing worry among the few people who had become her surrogate family. But how could she explain that the weapons weren't work for her? They were. Purpose, identity, the one thing in her life that made complete sense. Away from the armory, she felt lost, incomplete, like an actor without a script. "After tomorrow," she promised, knowing even as she spoke that it was likely a lie. "Whatever happens with the delegation visit, after that, I'll try to take some time to decompress." Marcus looked skeptical, but he nodded acceptance. "Just remember, Chun, you're more than your work. You're allowed to have a life outside these bulkheads." That evening, Maya found herself on the ship's weather deck, staring out at the endless expanse of Pacific Ocean that stretched toward a horizon she couldn't see in the darkness. The sea was calm, reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Above her, the ship's superstructure rose into the night, bristling with sensors and communication arrays that connected the Leviathan to a larger world of strategy and purpose that felt increasingly distant from her own daily existence. She thought about her parents, probably settling in for the evening news in their small house in Sacramento. Her father would be reading the paper in his worn recliner, her mother putting finishing touches on dinner preparations. They called every Sunday, their voices filled with pride for their daughter's naval career, though Maya suspected they understood very little about what she actually did. To them, she was serving her country, wearing the uniform with honor, building toward a secure future. The details of her obsession with mechanical perfection would have puzzled them. The thought of tomorrow's demonstration filled her with a mixture of anticipation and dread. For 6 years, she had perfected skills that seemed to have no real purpose beyond her own satisfaction. Now, suddenly, those skills might matter to people she had never met, officials whose approval could reshape her entire future. The weight of that possibility was both thrilling and terrifying. A gentle hand touched her shoulder, and Maya turned to find Petty Officer Torres beside her, drawn by the same restlessness that had brought Maya to the deck. "Beautiful night," Torres observed, settling against the rail beside her friend. "Jennifer," Maya said suddenly, the words escaping before she could consider their wisdom. "Do you think I'm wasting my potential?" Torres was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think you're the most naturally gifted weapons technician I've ever seen," she replied finally. "But I also think you're afraid. Afraid of what? Of finding out what you could really accomplish if you stopped hiding behind routine maintenance and started pushing the boundaries of what's possible. The words hit Maya with uncomfortable accuracy. She had been hiding. She realized, using the familiar comfort of her current role to avoid the uncertainty of greater challenges. Tomorrow's demonstration might force her out of that hiding place, whether she was ready or not. What if I'm not as good as people think I am? Maya asked quietly. What if all this is just, I don't know, a party trick that doesn't actually mean anything? Then you'll find out, Torres replied simply. But Chun, I've watched you work. What you do isn't a trick. It's art. And tomorrow, maybe you'll finally get to show people what art looks like when it's applied to something that matters. As the two women stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars reflect in the dark water, Maya felt something shift inside her chest. Tomorrow would bring judges and questions and expectations she couldn't predict. But it would also bring the chance to discover what lay beyond the boundaries she had accepted for so long. For the first time in months, the thought of sleep seemed possible. The delegation arrived at 080, with the kind of military precision that left no doubt about their importance. Maya watched from the armory's security monitor as the VIPs were piped aboard. 2 Navy captains, a Marine colonel, 3 civilians in expensive suits who moved with the measured confidence of congressional staffers, and a figure that made Maya's breath catch in her throat, Commander Sarah Mitchell, a legend in naval special warfare whose reputation preceded her like a force of nature. Holy shit, Marcus whispered, crowding beside Maya to get a better view of the monitor. That's the Commander Mitchell, the one who led the hostage rescue in Somalia 3 years ago. Maya nodded, unable to speak around the sudden tightness in her throat. Commander Mitchell was everything Maya had never dared to dream of becoming, a woman who had fought her way to the top of the military's most elite communities, earning respect through performance rather than politics. She moved with the fluid economy of someone who had faced death and emerged stronger, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Master Chief Hawkins appeared in the armory doorway, her uniform pressed to razor sharpness, and her expression betraying none of the tension Maya was certain she must be feeling. Petty Officer Chun, you're with me. Rivera, Torres, maintain normal operations. Maya fell into step behind Hawkins, her mind racing through the countless hours of preparation that had led to this moment. Her dress blues were immaculate, her shoes polished to mirror brightness, but she felt naked and exposed as they walked through the ship's corridors toward the delegation's temporary briefing space. The wardroom had been transformed into an impromptu conference area, with classified documents spread across tables and portable briefing screens displaying readiness statistics that Maya had never been privileged to see. The delegation members were engaged in quiet conversations that ceased the moment Hawkins and Maya entered. Gentlemen, ma'am, Hawkins began, her voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in uniform. This is Petty Officer 3rd Class Maya Chen, the sailor I mentioned in yesterday's preliminary briefing. Maya felt a dozen pairs of eyes focus on her with laser intensity, each observer cataloging details with the practiced efficiency of people whose job was to evaluate human potential. She came to attention automatically, her training taking over. Where her conscious mind threatened to fail, Captain Reynolds, the senior Navy officer in the delegation, stepped forward first. He was a thin man in his late 40s, with gray at his temples and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years at sea. Petty Officer Chun, Master Chief Hawkins has made some remarkable claims about your abilities with small arms. I hope you understand that we're here to verify readiness standards across the fleet, not to watch party tricks. The dismissive tone in his voice hit Maya like a slap, and she felt her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. This was exactly what she had feared, being treated like a circus act rather than a professional with legitimate skills. But before she could respond, Commander Mitchell's voice cut through the wardroom like a blade. Captain Reynolds, I suggest we reserve judgment until after the demonstration. Her voice carried the quiet authority that came from leading people in life or death situations. Master Chief Hawkins doesn't strike me as someone given to exaggeration. The tension in the room was palpable, the kind of electric charge that preceded either breakthrough or disaster. Maya found herself caught between competing forces: the dismissive skepticism of traditional Navy leadership and the professional curiosity of elite operators who understood that exceptional ability could emerge from unexpected places. Very well, Reynolds conceded, though his expression remained dubious. What exactly are we here to observe? Master Chief Hawkins gestured toward a table that had been set up with an array of disassembled weapons: M4 carbines, M249 squad automatic weapons, M240 machine guns, and several pistols. To Maya's surprise, there were also weapons she didn't immediately recognize: a specialized carbine with modifications she had never seen, and what appeared to be a foreign assault rifle. Petty Officer Chen will demonstrate weapons assembly proficiency across multiple platforms, Hawkins explained. Both standard fleet weapons and some specialized variants that our Naval Special Warfare teams employ. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she approached the table. The familiar weight of expectation settled over her shoulders, but this time it was different. These weren't shipmates watching her work. These were people who could reshape her entire future with their assessment. Before we begin, Commander Mitchell said, stepping closer to the table, I'd like to understand your background, Petty Officer. How long have you been working with these weapon systems? 6 years, ma'am, Maya replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Since I completed A school at Great Lakes. Formal training beyond initial weapons maintenance courses? No, ma'am. Everything I know, I learned through personal study and practical application. Mitchell's eyebrows rose slightly, and Maya caught a glance exchanged between the commander and one of the other naval officers. Personal study, Mitchell repeated. Can you be more specific? Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. I spend approximately 4 hours per day beyond my regular duties studying weapon systems, ma'am. Disassembly, reassembly, function testing, diagnostic procedures. I read technical manuals, manufacturer specifications, after-action reports that identify common failure modes. 4 hours per day, Captain Reynolds interjected, his tone suggesting he found the claim dubious. Every day? Yes, sir, for the past 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could hear the ship's ventilation system, the distant hum of machinery, the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She had just revealed the depth of her obsession to a roomful of strangers who held her future in their hands, and their expressions ranged from skeptical to genuinely concerned. That's over 4,000 hours of additional training, one of the civilian analysts observed, his voice carrying the precision of someone who lived in spreadsheets and statistical models. Self-directed, unsupervised training. Jesus Christ! Another voice muttered. Though Maya couldn't identify the speaker, Commander Mitchell moved to the weapons table, her fingers tracing over the disassembled components with the familiarity of someone who had depended on such tools for survival. These specialized weapons, she said, indicating the unfamiliar carbine. This is a Mk-18 with modifications specific to SEAL Team 6. You've never worked with this platform before? No, ma'am, Maya admitted. But if I could examine the components for a few minutes, I believe I could determine the proper assembly sequence. Believe? Reynolds's voice carried sharp challenge. Petty Officer, we're not here to watch you guess your way through unfamiliar equipment. Maya felt anger flash through her chest, hot and dangerous. The dismissive tone, the assumption that her abilities were somehow fraudulent or exaggerated, the implication that she was wasting everyone's time, it all combined into a surge of determination that bordered on fury. Sir, she said, her voice carrying an edge that surprised even her, I don't guess. I understand these weapons at a fundamental level, their mechanical principles. their engineering tolerances, their failure modes, and operational parameters. The specific configuration may be unfamiliar, but the underlying systems are not. The room fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. Maya realized she had just challenged a Navy captain in front of a room full of senior officials, a breach of protocol that could end her career regardless of her technical abilities. But something in Commander Mitchell's expression suggested approval rather than disapproval. "Show us," Mitchell said simply. Maya approached the table, her anger transforming into focused intensity. She began with the M4 carbine, her hands moving with the fluid precision that had become second nature over thousands of hours of practice. The weapon came apart in her hands like a flower blooming, in reverse upper and lower receivers separating. BOLT carrier group sliding free. Buffer spring compressing with its familiar whisper of coiled tension. The delegation watched in absolute silence as she worked, their skepticism gradually giving way to focused attention. Maya was dimly aware of their scrutiny, but her consciousness had narrowed to the weapons before her, each mechanical system revealing its secrets under her touch. The M4 reassembly took 34 seconds. She moved immediately to the M249. Her hands adapting to the different weight distribution and component relationships without conscious thought. The squad automatic weapon was more complex, its gas system and feeding mechanism requiring precise timing and alignment. But Maya had disassembled and reassembled the platform so many times that her muscle memory guided each movement. 77 seconds for the M249, a new personal record, achieved under pressure that would have crippled most people's performance. The M240 machine gun presented different challenges, heavier components, more complex gas system adjustments, precise timing, requirements for proper function. Maya approached it with the same methodical intensity, her fingers reading the metal surfaces like braille, interpreting the subtle feedback that told her when parts were properly seated and aligned. 2 minutes, 18 seconds for the M240. Fast enough to draw audible gasps from several delegation members, but it was the modified MK-18 that would define the day's success or failure. Maya studied the unfamiliar components for several minutes, her trained eye cataloging modifications and deviations from standard specifications. The trigger group had been extensively modified with components she didn't recognize. The barrel was shorter than standard with a specialized flash suppressor, and the bolt carrier group showed signs of precision machining that went far beyond military specifications. "This is a very specialized weapon," she said quietly, her fingers tracing over the components with scientific curiosity. The trigger modifications suggest it's designed for precision shooting rather than sustained fire. The bolt carrier has been weight optimized, probably to reduce felt recoil and improve accuracy. The gas system. She paused, studying the gas block more closely. "This is adjustable, isn't it? For use with suppressors or different ammunition weights." Commander Mitchell's expression had shifted from professional curiosity to something approaching amazement. "That's correct. All of it. This weapon belongs to one of my operators, Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. It took our unit armorer 6 months to perfect those modifications." Maya nodded, her confidence growing as the weapon systems revealed their logic under her examination. The assembly sequence will be similar to standard M4 platforms, but the timing has to be precise because of the modified components. If I install the bolt carrier group before properly seating the trigger assembly, the timing will be off and you'll get light primer strikes. She began the assembly process, her movements slower and more deliberate than with the familiar weapons. Each component required careful consideration, each connection verified before proceeding to the next step. The delegation watched in absolute silence as Maya worked through the unfamiliar configuration, her hands adapting to the modified weapons requirements through pure mechanical intuition. 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Not fast by her standards, but she had assembled a completely unfamiliar weapon system without documentation, without guidance, using only her understanding of mechanical principles and her ability to read the subtle language of engineered precision. "Function check," Commander Mitchell said, her voice carrying an edge of excitement that she was trying to suppress. Maya performed the standard weapon safety checks, verifying proper trigger function, bolt operation, and magazine seating. Every test confirmed what her hands had already told her. The weapon was assembled correctly, ready for operation, mechanically sound. "Outstanding," he said, though his tone suggested he was more puzzled than impressed. "Chun, where did you learn to work with weapons you've never seen before?" "The mechanical principles are the same, instructor," Maya replied, her confidence growing as she moved to the next weapon system. "Once you understand how something is supposed to work, the specific configuration becomes less important than the underlying engineering." The marksmanship assessment revealed capabilities that Maya hadn't known she possessed. Years of studying weapon systems had given her an intuitive understanding of ballistics, recoil management, and sight alignment that translated into exceptional accuracy even with unfamiliar platforms. Her groupings were tight, her transitions between targets smooth, her adaptation to different weapon systems immediate and effective. But it was the stress shooting exercise that truly demonstrated what 6 years of self-imposed pressure had created. The instructor subjected her to physical exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and psychological stress while requiring her to engage targets with precision that would challenge fresh, rested shooters. Maya found that the pressure clarified her focus rather than degrading it, that stress became a tool for enhanced performance rather than an obstacle to overcome. "Jesus Christ," one of the instructors muttered as Maya completed a shooting string that would have impressed seasoned operators. "Who the hell is this girl?" The question was rhetorical, but Maya found herself wondering the same thing. The person performing these assessments felt like a stranger, someone whose capabilities exceeded anything she had imagined about herself. The weapons in her hands responded as if they were extensions of her body, mechanical systems that existed to translate her will into physical reality. The final assessment was combat, simulation scenarios designed to test decision-making under pressure, tactical thinking, and the ability to apply technical skills in chaotic environments. Maya found herself moving through shoothouses and urban warfare simulations, engaging threats while protecting simulated civilians, making split-second decisions about when to use force and when to seek alternative solutions. Threat or non-threat? An instructor shouted as Maya rounded a corner to find a figure holding what might have been a weapon or might have been a tool. "Non-threat," she replied immediately, recognizing the posture and grip that indicated maintenance activity rather than aggressive intent. "Civilian contractor, possibly electrical work based on the tool configuration. Correct. Next scenario." The evaluations continued for 2 weeks, each day bringing new challenges designed to test different aspects of her potential as a special operations candidate. Maya felt herself changing during the process, her understanding of her own capabilities expanding as the assessments revealed strengths she hadn't known existed. The girl who had arrived at Coronado was being replaced by someone more confident, more capable, more aware of possibilities that extended far beyond routine weapons. Maintenance. The results meeting took place in a conference room that felt familiar from countless military briefings, but the people seated around the table represented a level of authority and expertise that Maya had never encountered before. Commander Mitchell was present, along with senior enlisted personnel whose ribbons and insignia told stories of operational deployments and specialized training that existed at the highest levels of military capability. "Petty Officer Chun, Commander," Mitchell began, her voice carrying the same authority that had impressed Maya during their first meeting. "Your assessment results are unprecedented. In 15 years of evaluating special operations candidates, I have never seen anyone demonstrate. Your combination of technical aptitude, stress tolerance, and adaptive capability. Maya felt her heart rate increase, uncertain whether the unprecedented nature of her results was positive or negative for her future prospects. Your weapons handling scores are literally off the charts, Mitchell continued. You achieved expert qualification on platforms you had never seen before, demonstrated mechanical understanding that surpasses most of our senior armorers, and showed stress response patterns that indicate exceptional suitability for high-pressure operational environments. Ma'am, Maya said carefully, does that mean I'm being accepted for advanced training? Mitchell smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Coronado, Maya felt like she might be receiving good news. Shun, it means you're being accepted for immediate entry into the most advanced weapons specialization program Naval Special Warfare has ever developed. You're not going to train to become an operator. You're going to train to become the person who makes our operators more effective than they've ever been before. The explanation that followed redefined Maya's understanding of what was possible within the military structure. Rather than attempting to transform her into a general-purpose special operations warrior, the assessment had revealed that her unique talents were best applied to specialized roles that didn't exist in traditional organizational charts. She would receive operator-level training to understand the environments and challenges that special warfare personnel faced. But her primary mission would be to push the boundaries of weapons technology and tactical application. We're creating a position that has never existed before, Mitchell explained. Advanced Weapons Systems Specialist. You'll work directly with manufacturers to develop new capabilities, train our most elite operators on cutting-edge equipment, and serve as a technical advisor for missions that require specialized weapons expertise. Maya felt the weight of unprecedented opportunity settling over her like a cloak woven from possibility and responsibility. Everything she had worked toward, every hour of obsessive dedication, every moment of feeling like her abilities were being wasted, all of it had been preparation for a role that the military was creating specifically to utilize her unique combination of talents. Ma'am, she said, her voice steady despite the emotional turbulence churning through her chest. I'm honored by the confidence you're showing in my abilities. When do I begin? Tomorrow, Mitchell replied. Your training will take place here at Coronado, but it will also involve rotations to specialized facilities throughout the country. Manufacturers' test facilities, advanced research installations, operational units that need your expertise for specific missions. You'll spend the next 2 years becoming the most qualified weapons specialist in the entire Department of Defense. As the meeting concluded and Maya prepared to return to her temporary quarters, Commander Mitchell approached her with a small package wrapped in official Navy paper. Chun, this is from Master Chief Hawkins. She asked me to give it to you after we confirmed your acceptance into the program. Maya opened the package to find a set of collar devices, the rank insignia of a petty officer second class. Attached was a handwritten note in Hawkins's precise script. Excellence creates its own opportunities. Your dedication has earned advancement that normal timelines couldn't provide. Wear these with pride, and remember that weapons are only as good as the people who understand them completely. The promotion was effective immediately. Recognition that her new role required authority commensurate with the responsibility she would be assuming. Maya felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes as she realized that her obsession with mechanical perfection had somehow transformed into a career path that exceeded her wildest dreams. That evening, she stood on the beach at Coronado watching the Pacific Ocean stretch toward a horizon she couldn't see in the gathering darkness. The waves rolled ashore with hypnotic regularity, each one carrying spray that tasted of salt and possibility. 6 months ago, she had been a routine maintainer aboard a ship, performing duties that seemed to have no larger purpose. Now she was preparing to become something that hadn't existed before, a specialist whose understanding of weapons would help shape the future of special operations. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. Heard through the grapevine that you crushed the assessment. The armory isn't the same without you, but Torres and I are proud as hell. Don't forget where you came from when you're designing weapons for the future. Maya smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. She would never forget the USS Leviathan's armory, the place where her obsession had found focus and her capabilities had crystallized into something meaningful. The weapons that had been her teachers and companions for 6 years had prepared her for opportunities she couldn't have imagined when she first learned to disassemble an M4 carbine with trembling, uncertain hands. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter. One filled with challenges that would make her assessment period seem simple by comparison. But tonight, standing at the edge of the continent with the vast Pacific before her, Maya allowed herself to believe that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The weapons of her future were waiting to be understood, and she was ready to understand them completely. The testing facility at China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station hummed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine just a few years earlier. Maya Chen, now Petty Officer First Class Chen, though her unofficial title of Weapons Architect carried more weight than her formal rank, stood before a prototype rifle that represented the culmination of everything she had learned about mechanical precision and operational effectiveness. The weapon before her was sleek, purposeful, and unlike anything that had ever been fielded by military forces. Carbon fiber components reduced weight while increasing durability. A revolutionary gas system eliminated the timing problems that had plagued automatic weapons for decades. Smart optics integrated ballistic computers that could compensate for environmental factors in real time. Every component had been designed, tested, and refined according to standards that Maya had developed through 3 years of collaboration with the most advanced weapons manufacturers in the world. The prototype designation is XM47, she explained to the assembled group of special operations personnel who had come to evaluate her latest creation. It incorporates 17 different technological advances that we've developed over the past 18 months. Reliability is approximately 300% better than current platforms. Accuracy is improved by 47% at all ranges, and maintenance requirements are reduced by 60%. Master Chief Rodriguez, the SEAL whose modified MK-18 had been part of Maya's initial demonstration years earlier, examined the weapon with the practiced eye of someone who had depended on similar tools for survival in hostile environments. "Shun, this looks like science fiction. Are you sure it actually works?" Maya smiled, recognizing the skepticism that always accompanied revolutionary advances. "Master Chief, would you like to find out?" The demonstration that followed would be discussed in special operations communities for years to come. The XM47 performed flawlessly under conditions that would have challenged any existing weapon system. Sustained fire rates that should have caused overheating problems. Accuracy. Standards that exceeded what most shooters could achieve with precision rifles. Reliability under environmental stresses that would have disabled conventional platforms. "Jesus fucking Christ," Rodriguez breathed as he completed the evaluation course, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. "Chun, this isn't just an improvement. This is a completely new category of weapon." "That's the idea, Master Chief," Maya replied. "We didn't want to make existing weapons a little better. We wanted to redefine what was possible." The success of the XM47 was just the most recent achievement in a career that had exceeded everyone's expectations, including Maya's own. Her role as Advanced Weapons Systems Specialist had evolved into something that had no precedent in military history, a position that combined technical expertise, operational understanding, and innovative vision in ways that were reshaping how the Department of Defense approached weapons development. She had spent months embedded with special operations units, understanding how weapons were actually used in combat rather than how they were supposed to function according to technical manuals. She had worked with manufacturers to develop new materials, new manufacturing processes, and new approaches to mechanical design that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. She had trained elite operators on equipment that didn't exist in any official inventory, weapons that were so advanced they seemed magical to people accustomed conventional platforms. But the most significant change was in Maya herself. The uncertain young woman who had arrived at Coronado 3 years earlier had been replaced by someone who moved with quiet confidence, who spoke with authority that came from demonstrated competence, who understood that her unique combination of abilities carried responsibilities that extended far beyond personal achievement. 5 years later, the briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command was filled with personnel whose presence indicated the importance of the operation being planned. Maya sat at the conference table as the only non-operator in the room, but her input was being sought with the same urgency as tactical and intelligence assessments. The mission parameters were classified beyond her clearance level, but the weapons requirements were extraordinary precision shooting at ranges that exceeded normal capabilities, reliability under environmental conditions that would challenge any equipment, and performance standards that existing platforms couldn't meet. The target engagement ranges are between 800 and 1200 meters, the mission commander explained, his voice carrying the tension that accompanied high-stakes operations. Environmental conditions include temperature variations from -20 to +45 Celsius, humidity approaching saturation, and wind speeds up to 35 knots. Standard sniper platforms won't provide the reliability margins we need. Maya studied the mission parameters, her mind automatically calculating the mechanical stresses and environmental challenges that would affect weapon performance. Sir, I recommend the XM52 Precision Platform with the Advanced Environmental Compensation Package. We've tested it under similar conditions and achieved reliability rates above 98%. The XM52 isn't in production yet, another voice objected. It's still in prototype phase, which is why I'm recommending we expedite final testing and provide 2 prototype systems for this mission. Maya replied calmly. The operational requirements justify the risk of using pre-production equipment. The discussion that followed demonstrated how completely Maya's role had evolved beyond traditional military classifications. She wasn't just recommending equipment, she was authorizing the deployment of weapons that existed nowhere else in the world, systems that she had personally designed and tested for exactly these kinds of extreme operational requirements. Chun, the mission commander said as the briefing concluded, if we deploy your prototypes and they fail, people die. Are you confident enough in your work to stake lives on it? The question was fair, and Maya appreciated its directness. Sir, I've staked my entire career on understanding these weapons completely. The XM52 platforms I'm recommending have been tested beyond any standards that existing equipment meets. I'm confident they'll perform as required. Outstanding. Make it happen. As Maya left the briefing room, she reflected on how far she had traveled from her origins as a routine maintainer. The weapons she was now developing would be carried by some of the most elite warriors in the world, used in operations that would never be publicly acknowledged, serving objectives that she might never fully understand. But her role was to ensure that when those warriors needed their weapons to function perfectly, under impossible conditions, they would have tools that met every challenge. 8 years later, the ceremony at the Pentagon was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. The Secretary of Defense stood before an audience that included senior military leadership, congressional representatives, and defense industry executives, whose companies had collaborated on projects that were reshaping how modern militaries approached weapons technology. Today we recognize achievement that transcends normal military service. The Secretary began, his words carrying the weight of official acknowledgement for contributions that had been classified for years. Petty Officer First Class Maya Chen has revolutionized weapons technology in ways that have enhanced the effectiveness of our Special Operations Forces immeasurably. Maya stood at attention as the citation was read, describing innovations and achievements that represented 8 years of obsessive dedication applied to challenges that had seemed impossible when she first encountered them. Weapons systems that had achieved reliability rates previously thought impossible. Training programs that had elevated the capabilities of elite operators to new levels. Technical innovations that had been adopted by allied militaries around the world. The Presidential Unit Citation for Exceptional Service is awarded in recognition of contributions to national security that extend far beyond normal expectations of military duty. As the medal was pinned to her uniform, Maya felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The countless hours in the Leviathan's armory, driven by obsession she couldn't explain. The demonstration that had changed her entire trajectory. The assessments at Coronado that had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. The years of pushing boundaries that others had accepted as immutable. But more than personal achievement, the ceremony represented validation that excellence could create opportunities that didn't exist until someone demonstrated what was possible. Maya had become something that the military hadn't known it needed, a specialist whose understanding of weapons transcended traditional categories, whose innovations were reshaping what elite units could accomplish. 12 years later, the training facility at Quantico buzzed with activity as a new generation of Marines prepared for deployments that would test everything they had learned about combat effectiveness. Maya, now Senior Chief Petty Officer Chen and the Director of Advanced Weapons Development for the Department of Defense, watched from the observation deck as instructors put recruits through exercises using weapons that she had helped design. Evolution of weapons technology had accelerated beyond anything she could have predicted when she first began her obsessive study of mechanical systems. Smart weapons that could adapt to environmental conditions automatically. Modular platforms that could be reconfigured for different missions in minutes rather than hours. Training systems that used virtual reality to prepare operators for scenarios they might never encounter but needed to be ready to handle. "Ma'am," one of the young instructors approached, his voice carrying the respect that had become standard when addressing her. "The new recruits are asking about the development history of the weapons they're training with. Would you be willing to speak to them about how these systems came to exist?" Maya nodded, recognizing an opportunity to share lessons that went beyond technical specifications. "Of course. But let me tell them a story about a young sailor who thought she was just cleaning weapons until she discovered that obsession with excellence can transform not just individual capabilities, but entire institutions." As she walked toward the training area, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The weapons that had been her private obsession had become the foundation for innovations that enhanced the capabilities of thousands of service members. The skills that had seemed to serve no greater purpose had evolved into expertise that was reshaping how modern militaries approached combat effectiveness. But perhaps most importantly, her story had demonstrated that exceptional ability could emerge from unexpected places. That dedication applied with sufficient intensity could create opportunities that didn't exist until someone proved they were possible. 15 years later, the auditorium at the Naval War College was filled with senior military officers, defense contractors, and academic researchers who had gathered to hear Maya deliver the keynote address at the Advanced Weapons Technology Symposium. At 39, she held a position that had been created specifically to utilize her unique combination of technical expertise and operational understanding. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Advanced Weapons Development, a role that made her the highest-ranking enlisted person ever to hold a civilian Pentagon appointment. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the authority that came from 15 years of proving that exceptional performance could transcend traditional military hierarchies. I want to tell you about a young sailor who spent her nights in a ship's armory, driven by an obsession she couldn't explain, perfecting skills that seemed to serve no greater purpose. The audience listened in attentive silence as Maya recounted the journey from routine maintenance to revolutionary innovation, from hidden dedication to recognized expertise, from individual obsession to institutional transformation. But her message went beyond personal achievement to address larger questions about how organizations could identify and nurture exceptional ability that didn't fit traditional categories. Excellence, she concluded, is not about meeting standards that others have established. Excellence is about pushing beyond those standards to discover what becomes possible when dedication is applied with absolute commitment. Every organization, every institution, every society contains individuals whose capabilities exceed what their current roles allow them to demonstrate. Our responsibility is to create environments where that potential can be revealed and applied to challenges that matter. As the applause subsided, Maya looked out over an audience that included people whose decisions would shape military technology for decades to come. Among them, she imagined, were individuals whose hidden obsessions and unexplored capabilities might hold keys to innovations that would redefine what was possible in their respective fields, the weapons that had been her teachers for so many years had taught her lessons that extended far beyond mechanical precision. They had shown her that understanding could become mastery, that mastery could become innovation, and that innovation could transform not just individual lives, but entire institutions. 20 years later, the private ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery was small, attended only by family members and the few people who had played crucial roles in Maya's extraordinary journey. Master Chief Hawkins, now retired but still carrying herself with the dignity that had defined her naval service, stood beside the memorial wall where Maya's name had been added to honor her contributions to national security. "She changed everything," Hawkins said quietly, her words addressed to Maya's parents and the small group of special operations veterans who had worked with her over the years. Not just weapons technology, but how we think about potential, about what becomes possible when someone refuses to accept limitations that others assume are immutable. The memorial inscription was simple: Senior Chief Petty Officer Maya Chen. She saw weapons as mechanical poetry and taught a generation of warriors to read their language. But the words barely captured the magnitude of what she had accomplished during a career that had redefined the boundaries between technical expertise and operational capability. Marcus Rivera, now a retired Master Chief himself, approached the memorial with a familiar M4 carbine, one of the weapons from the Leviathan's armory that Maya had maintained during her early years of obsessive dedication. "She would have wanted this here," he said, placing the weapon beside the memorial. The tool that started everything. The first system that taught her to see mechanical perfection as something worth pursuing absolutely. As the small group shared memories of a woman whose hidden obsession had transformed into innovations that enhanced the capabilities of countless service members, the larger story of her life continued to unfold through the work of people she had trained, the weapons she had developed, and the standards she had established for what could be achieved when excellence was pursued without compromise. The weapons technology advances that bore her influence were being used by special operations forces around the world, enabling missions that would have been impossible with conventional equipment. The training programs she had developed were producing operators whose capabilities exceeded what previous generations had thought possible. The innovations she had pioneered were inspiring, new approaches to mechanical design that extended far beyond military applications. But perhaps most importantly, her story had become a lesson about the potential that existed within individuals whose capabilities didn't fit traditional categories, whose obsessions might seem pointless until they proved to be the foundation for achievements that no one had imagined possible. 25 years later, The Maya Chen Institute for Advanced Weapons Technology stood as a testament to the enduring impact of one person's obsessive dedication to mechanical perfection. Located on a sprawling campus that combined research facilities, testing ranges, and training centers, the institute had become the premier destination for individuals whose understanding of weapons systems exceeded conventional boundaries. Dr. Jennifer Torres, Maya's former shipmate, who had completed her own transformation from enlisted sailor to PhD researcher, served as the institute's director, carrying forward the vision that Maya had articulated during their countless conversations. In the Leviathan's armory, Maya believed that weapons were mechanical systems that deserved to be understood completely, Torres explained to new students during orientation sessions. But more than that, she believed that understanding applied with sufficient intensity could transform not just the systems themselves, but the people who worked with them and the institutions they served. The Institute's students came from military forces around the world, drawn by programs that promised to push the boundaries of what was possible in weapons technology and tactical application. They studied systems that incorporated advances Maya had pioneered, learned principles she had developed, and approached mechanical challenges with the same obsessive dedication that had defined her early years of hidden preparation. In the Institute's museum, visitors could see the progression of weapons technology that had been influenced by Maya's innovations. From the modified platforms she had worked with during her assessment at Coronado, to the revolutionary systems that had emerged from her years of collaboration with manufacturers and research institutions, the display demonstrated how individual obsession had evolved into institutional transformation. But the most significant exhibit was a recreation of a ship's armory, complete with the worn wooden workbench where Maya had spent countless hours perfecting skills that seemed to serve no purpose beyond her own satisfaction. The plaque beside the display read, "Excellence begins with individual dedication applied to challenges that others consider routine. Greatness emerges when that dedication is applied with sufficient intensity to transcend normal limitations." 30 years later, the documentary film crew had spent months interviewing people who had known Maya during different phases of her extraordinary career, seeking to understand how a routine weapons maintainer had evolved into one of the most influential figures in modern military technology. The final interview was with Commander Sarah Mitchell, now Admiral Mitchell, and one of the senior military officers who had overseen Maya's transition from hidden obsession to recognized expertise. "People ask me what made Maya Chen special," Admiral Mitchell said, her voice carrying the weight of 3 decades spent evaluating exceptional military personnel. "They want to know if it was natural talent, or determination, or some combination of factors that created her unique capabilities. But I think they're asking the wrong question." The interviewer leaned forward, recognizing that Admiral Mitchell was building toward a significant observation. "What's the right question? The right question is, how many other Maya Chens are out there, serving in routine assignments, perfecting capabilities that their organizations don't know exist, waiting for someone to recognize that they're hidden?" Obsessions might be the foundation for innovations that could transform entire institutions. Admiral Mitchell gestured toward a photograph that showed Maya working with weapons that had seemed like science fiction when she first developed them. Maya wasn't unique because of her abilities. She was unique because someone, Master Chief Hawkins, recognized those abilities and created opportunities for them to be applied to challenges that mattered. The real lesson of her story isn't about individual greatness. It's about institutional responsibility to identify and nurture potential that doesn't fit traditional categories. The documentary concluded with footage of current Institute students working with weapon systems that incorporated advances Maya had pioneered, their dedication to mechanical perfection echoing the obsession that had driven her own development decades earlier. But the film's final message was broader than individual achievement or technological innovation. In every organization, in every institution, in every society, the narrator concluded, there are individuals whose capabilities exceed what their current roles allow them to demonstrate. Maya Chen's story reminds us that excellence applied with sufficient intensity can create opportunities that didn't exist until someone proved they were possible. The question is not whether such potential exists, it's whether we're wise enough to recognize it and courageous enough to create environments where it can flourish. Final scene. 50 years later, the elderly man approached the Maya Chen Institute's memorial garden with the careful steps of someone whose body had been shaped by decades of demanding service. Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the SEAL whose modified Mk-18 had been part of Maya's initial demonstration half a century earlier, carried a wreath that honored not just Maya's memory, but the countless service members whose lives had been enhanced by her innovations. As he placed the wreath beside the simple memorial stone, Rodriguez reflected on the weapons he had carried during his operational career. Every platform had incorporated advances that traced back to Maya's obsessive dedication to mechanical perfection. Every mission had been made more likely to succeed because someone had refused to accept that existing capabilities represented the limits of what was possible. "Thank you," he said quietly, his words addressed to a woman whose hidden obsession had transformed into innovations that continued to enhance military effectiveness decades after her death. "For showing us that excellence is not about meeting standards others have established, but about pushing beyond those standards to discover what becomes possible when dedication is applied without compromise." The memorial garden was quiet except for the distant sounds of current students training with weapons that represented the future continuing evolution of technologies Maya had pioneered. But her larger legacy was not captured in any specific innovation or achievement. It was embodied in the principle that exceptional ability could emerge from unexpected places, that obsession applied with sufficient intensity could transform not just individual capabilities, but entire institutions. As Rodriguez walked away from the memorial, he passed a young instructor leading a group of new students toward the training facilities. The instructor was explaining the development history of the weapons they would be learning to use, telling them about a sailor who had spent her nights in a ship's armory, driven by obsession she couldn't explain, perfecting skills that seemed to serve no greater purpose. Until, the instructor concluded, her assembly speed made Navy SEALs look amateur and changed everything we thought we knew about what was possible when excellence is pursued absolutely. The students listened with the attention that came from understanding they were about to learn from innovations that had been proven in the most demanding environments imaginable. But more than technical training, they were receiving a lesson about the potential that existed within individuals whose capabilities exceeded what their current roles allowed them to demonstrate. Maya Chen's story had become more than individual achievement. It had become a reminder that in every generation, in every organization, in every society, there are people whose hidden obsessions and unexplored capabilities might hold keys to innovations that could redefine what humanity can accomplish when dedication is applied with absolute commitment. The weapons that had been her teachers continued to serve as tools for those who understood that mechanical perfection was not an end in itself, but a pathway to capabilities that could transform not just individual lives, but the institutions they served and the world they protected. One of the civilian analysts breathed, and Maya realized that the entire room had been holding its breath. "Captain." Reynolds stepped forward, his earlier skepticism replaced by something that might have been embarrassment. "Petty Officer Chen," he said formally, "please accept my apologies for my earlier comments. What we've just witnessed is genuinely exceptional, but the demonstration was far from over." Master Chief Hawkins had prepared additional challenges, including a blindfolded reassembly test that Maya had practiced countless times in the armory's solitude. The delegation watched in stunned silence as she assembled an M4 carbine with her eyes covered, her fingers reading the component surfaces like a musician playing a familiar song. 49 seconds blindfolded. A time that seemed to violate the laws of physics and human capability. "How is this possible?" one of the congressional staffers asked, his voice carrying genuine bewilderment. "The training protocols we've reviewed suggest that this level of proficiency should require years of specialized instruction. It has required." "Years," Maya replied quietly. "Just not the kind of instruction the Navy provides in formal courses." Commander Mitchell moved closer, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine curiosity. "Petty officer, have you ever considered applying for Naval Special Warfare training?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She had dreamed of such opportunities, but her current rating didn't provide clear pathways into the elite communities, where her skills might find proper application. "Ma'am, my current classification doesn't typically lead to special operations assignments." "Classifications can be changed," Mitchell said firmly. "Exceptional people create their own opportunities." She turned to address the room. "Gentlemen, what we've witnessed here represents the kind of natural ability that our special operations communities desperately need. This sailor has achieved mastery through pure dedication and natural aptitude. Imagine what she might accomplish with proper advanced training and operational application." Maya felt the room's energy shift around her, as if her future was being rewritten in real time by people whose authority extended far beyond her current understanding. The weapons on the table, disassembled and reassembled, familiar and foreign, simple and complex, had become the instruments of a transformation she had never dared to imagine. But the day's revelations were far from complete. As the delegation prepared to move on to other assessments, Captain Reynolds pulled Master Chief Hawkins aside for a private conversation that Maya couldn't hear, but whose intensity was unmistakable. Whatever they were discussing, it involved frequent glances in her direction and the kind of animated gestures that suggested major decisions were being made. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Chun," Commander Mitchell said, approaching while the senior officers were engaged in their conference, "I want you to understand something. What you've demonstrated today isn't just technical proficiency. It's the kind of mechanical intuition that can't be taught through normal training pipelines. My operators, some of the most elite warriors in the world, would be impressed by what you've just accomplished." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion she couldn't quite identify. Pride, certainly, but also fear and anticipation and a strange sense of vertigo, as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff whose bottom she couldn't see. "Ma'am," she managed, "I just do what makes sense to me. These weapons, they're not complicated if you understand how they're supposed to work." "That's exactly my point," Mitchell replied. "Most people see weapons as tools to be operated. You see them as systems to be understood. That distinction is what separates technicians from artists and artists from warriors." The word warrior hung in the air between them, carrying implications that Maya had never applied to herself. She was a maintainer, a behind-the-scenes professional who ensured that other people's weapons functioned properly. The idea that her obsession with mechanical perfection might qualify her for something more seemed too vast to comprehend. The private conference between the senior officers concluded, and Captain Reynolds returned to address Maya directly. His expression had undergone another transformation, from skepticism to respect to something that looked suspiciously like calculation. "Petty Officer Chun," he said formally, "based on what we've observed today, the delegation will be recommending you for immediate evaluation by Naval Special Warfare Command. If you're interested, and if you meet the physical and psychological screening requirements, there may be opportunities for advanced training that would better utilize your exceptional abilities." Maya felt the deck seem to shift beneath her feet, though she knew the ship was steady on course. 6 years of hidden obsession, of perfecting skills that seemed to serve no greater purpose, had suddenly become the foundation for possibilities she had never imagined. The weapons before her, silent now, but somehow still radiating mechanical perfection, had become the keys to a future she couldn't yet envision. "Sir," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I would be honored to pursue any opportunities for advanced training." "Outstanding," Reynolds replied. "Master Chief Hawkins will coordinate the preliminary paperwork, but Chun ... He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "What you've shown us today is remarkable, but special operations training is unlike anything you've experienced. The physical and mental demands are extreme, the failure rate is high, and the expectations are unforgiving. Are you prepared for that level of challenge?" Maya thought about the thousands of hours she had spent in the armory, pushing herself beyond what anyone expected or required, driven by an internal standard that accepted nothing less than perfection. She thought about the loneliness of excellence, the isolation that came with capabilities that others couldn't understand or appreciate. She thought about the restlessness that had been growing stronger each day, the sense that her current role was too small for the person she was becoming. "Sir," she said, meeting his gaze with complete conviction, "I've been preparing for that challenge my entire career." The delegation departed an hour later, leaving behind a transformed armory and a fundamentally changed understanding of what was possible when natural ability met obsessive dedication. Maya stood among her weapons, reassembled now and returned to their racks, feeling as if she were seeing them for the first time. "Holy shit, Chun," Marcus said, entering the armory as the official proceedings concluded. "The entire ship is talking about what happened in there." Torres said she could hear gasps coming from the wardroom. Maya nodded absently, her mind still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. In the space of 2 hours, her carefully ordered world had been turned upside down, her hidden obsession revealed as something far more significant than she had ever dared to believe. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I think everything just changed." "Yeah," he replied, settling onto his familiar stool near the ammunition lockers. "The question is, are you ready for whatever comes next?" Maya looked around the armory, her sanctuary, her workshop, her prison, and her launching pad all in one. The weapons that had been her obsession for 6 years seemed to pulse with new possibility, as if they too understood that their quiet partnership was about to evolve into something unprecedented. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I guess we're about to find out." The orders came through official channels exactly 72 hours after the delegation's departure, transmitted with the kind of urgent priority that left no doubt about their importance. Maya stared at the message on her workstation screen, reading the words for the 4th time, as if repetition might somehow make them more believable. "Immediate transfer authorized. Report, NAS Coronado for Special Warfare Preliminary. Assessment, effective date, 15 days following message transmission." "Jesus fucking Christ," Marcus breathed, reading over her shoulder. "Coronado, they're actually sending you to SEAL training." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she printed the orders, the laser printer's mechanical sound seeming unnaturally loud in the armory's sudden silence. "Naval Air Station Coronado, home to basic underwater demolition SEAL training. The crucible where ordinary sailors either transformed into elite warriors or washed out in failure." The reputation of badass training was legendary throughout the Navy. 6 months of physical and mental torment designed to identify the rare individuals who possessed the combination of ability, determination, and psychological resilience required for naval special warfare. "It's not SEAL training," Maya corrected, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's preliminary assessment. They're probably just going to evaluate whether I'm even qualified to attempt the actual program." Torres appeared in the armory doorway, her face flushed with excitement and something that might have been envy. "Chun, the whole ship knows about your orders. The captain himself called Master Chief Hawkins to congratulate her on identifying exceptional talent. The attention was overwhelming, transformative, and terrifying in equal measure. For 6 years, Maya had existed in comfortable anonymity, perfecting her skills in isolation while avoiding the spotlight that came with recognition. Now suddenly, she was the subject of conversations in wardrooms and berthing spaces throughout the ship, her abilities discussed and analyzed by people who had never spoken to her directly. "Have you told your parents?" Torres asked, settling beside Marcus near the ammunition lockers. The three of them had formed an unlikely family unit over the months, bound together by shared duties and the peculiar intimacy that developed among people living in close quarters far from home. Maya shook her head. The thought of explaining her situation to her parents filled her with anxiety that had nothing to do with military expectations. How could she make them understand that their daughter, who had joined the Navy to learn a trade and build a stable future, was now being considered for training that would fundamentally reshape her identity? Her parents' pride in her naval service was based on their understanding of her as a responsible young woman who maintained weapons for other people to use. The concept of their daughter becoming a warrior herself was beyond their frame of reference. "I don't know what to tell them," she admitted. "They think I'm safe aboard a ship, doing technical work that keeps me away from combat. If they knew I was volunteering for special operations training, they'd be proud," Marcus said firmly. "Scared as hell, but proud. Maya, do you understand what this means? Out of everyone in the entire Navy, they picked you. Based on one demonstration of your abilities, they're willing to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in advanced training." The financial reality was staggering when she considered it objectively. Special operations training was enormously expensive, with failure rates. That meant the majority of resources invested were ultimately wasted on candidates who couldn't complete the programs. The fact that senior officers were willing to make that investment, based solely on her weapons handling abilities, suggested a level of confidence that Maya didn't entirely share. Master Chief Hawkins entered the armory, her expression unreadable, but her posture suggesting significant news. "Chun, I need to see you in my office. Bring your service record and any documentation of your additional training." Maya gathered the requested materials, her mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps the orders had been rescinded. Perhaps someone higher in the chain of command had reviewed her file and determined that her background didn't support the investment in advanced training. Perhaps the whole thing had been an administrative error that was now being corrected. Hawkins's office was a study in controlled chaos, technical manuals stacked on every available surface, maintenance schedules covering one wall, and photographs from 3 decades of naval service creating a visual timeline of the Master Chief's career. Maya had been in this space dozens of times for routine meetings, but today it felt different, charged with possibility and uncertainty. "Sit," Hawkins commanded, settling behind her desk with the measured movements of someone who had learned to project authority through economy of motion. "Chun, I want you to understand what's happening here, because I'm not sure you fully grasp the magnitude of this opportunity." Maya remained silent, sensing that the Master Chief's words were building towards something significant. "In 31 years of naval service, I have never not once seen anyone demonstrate the level of natural ability with weapons systems that you showed to that delegation. Commander Mitchell called me personally yesterday. Do you know what she said?" Maya shook her head, afraid to interrupt the flow of revelation. "She said that in 15 years of special operations, working with some of the most elite warriors in the world, she has never encountered anyone who understood weapons at the intuitive level you demonstrated." She used the word unprecedented. The weight of Mitchell's assessment settled over Maya like a physical presence. She had spent years believing that her obsession with mechanical perfection was essentially meaningless, a personal quirk that happened to make her exceptionally good at a narrow range of duties. The idea that elite operators, people whose lives depended on their weapons, would view her abilities as genuinely exceptional was almost impossible to process. "Master Chief," Maya said carefully, "I appreciate the confidence, but I'm just a maintainer. I've never been in combat, never operated in high-stress environments, never had to apply my skills under life-or-death pressure. What if I can't handle the psychological demands of special operations training?" Hawkins studied her for a long moment, her pale blue eyes seeming to peer directly into Maya's soul. "Chun, let me ask you something. How many hours per week do you spend in the armory beyond your required duties?" "I don't know exactly. I do," Hawkins interrupted, "because I've been tracking your work patterns for the past year. 43 hours per week, on average. You spend more time with weapon systems than most people spend at their primary jobs. You've created your own high-stress environment through pure obsession with perfection." The observation hit Maya with uncomfortable accuracy. She had indeed created a private world of relentless standards and self-imposed pressure, driving herself to levels of performance that served no apparent purpose beyond her own psychological need for excellence. Perhaps that obsession was preparation for challenges she had never consciously anticipated. "But there's something else," Hawkins continued, opening a manila folder that contained documents Maya didn't recognize. "The preliminary assessment at Coronado isn't just about weapons proficiency. They're interested in your psychological profile, your learning capabilities, your ability to adapt under pressure. And based on additional research into your background, they've uncovered some interesting patterns." Maya felt her pulse quicken. She had never attempted to hide anything about her past, but the thought of military investigators examining her history was unsettling. "Your academic records," Hawkins said, extracting several sheets of paper. "You scored in the 97th percentile on the ASVAB, qualified for nuclear power training, had offers for advanced technical programs you declined in favor of weapons maintenance. Why?" The question was simple, but the answer required Maya to articulate motivations she had never fully examined. "The weapons made sense to me," she said finally. "Nuclear power, electronics, computer systems, they were abstract. But weapons are mechanical systems I could touch, understand, improve through direct manipulation. They felt real." "Felt real," Hawkins repeated. "Chun, do you understand that most people find weapons intimidating, dangerous, emotionally disturbing? You find them comforting. That's not normal." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, uncertain whether the Master Chief's observation was criticism or praise. "Is that a problem?" "For most assignments, yes. For special operations, it's exactly what they need. Warriors who see weapons as natural extensions of themselves, tools to be understood completely rather than feared or simply operated." Hawkins leaned forward, her expression intensifying. "There's something else in your file. Your psychological evaluation from basic training flagged you as having unusually high stress tolerance and an atypical relationship with risk assessment." Maya had no memory of psychological evaluations beyond the standard processing that all recruits experienced. The idea that military psychologists had identified unusual patterns in her mental makeup was both fascinating and disturbing. "What kind of a typical relationship?" "Most people's performance degrades under stress. Your performance improves. The more pressure you face, the more focused and capable you become. That's not learned behavior, it's neurological wiring that probably one person in 10,000 possesses naturally." The revelation was staggering. Maya had always known that she worked best under pressure, that the intensity of challenging situations seemed to clarify her thinking rather than cloud it. She had assumed this was normal, that everyone experienced stress as a performance enhancer, rather than a debilitating force. "Master Chief," she said slowly, "are you telling me that my obsession with weapons and my response to pressure are indicators that I single quotes am what?" Psychologically suited for special operations? I'm telling you that the combination of your natural abilities, your psychological profile, and your demonstrated dedication represents exactly what Naval Special Warfare is looking for. Commander Mitchell didn't recommend you for preliminary assessment because she felt sorry for an underutilized maintainer. She recommended you because she believes you have the potential to become one of the most effective operators she's ever encountered. Maya sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications of everything she had just learned. Her carefully constructed understanding of herself as a competent but unremarkable sailor with an unusual hobby was crumbling to reveal something far more significant. The weapons that had been her private obsession were apparently the foundation for capabilities that elite warriors would recognize and value. What happens if I fail? She asked quietly. Hawkins's expression softened slightly, revealing the maternal concern that existed beneath her professional demeanor. Then you return to fleet service with skills and experience that will make you valuable anywhere you serve. But Chun, I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to the armory, shipmates who had heard about Maya's orders and wanted to offer congratulations, ask questions, or simply witness firsthand the person who had somehow transcended the normal boundaries of naval career progression. The attention was overwhelming, but Maya found herself grateful for the distraction from her own churning thoughts. Staff Sergeant Williams arrived with his usual direct manner, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. Chun, I wanted to give you something before you disappear into the special operations world. Maya accepted the package, feeling its weight and recognizing the outline of what was inside. Staff Sergeant, you don't need to open it, he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Inside the wrapping was a combat knife, not the standard issue blade that every Marine carried, but a custom piece with a blade that gleamed like polished silver and a handle wrapped in paracord that showed signs of extensive use. The balance was perfect, the edge sharp enough to cut shadows. This belonged to my platoon sergeant in Afghanistan, Williams explained, Master Sergeant Rodriguez. He carried it through 3 deployments, used it to save lives and take them when necessary. When he retired, he gave it to me. Now I'm giving it to you. Maya turned the knife over in her hands, feeling the weight of its history and the responsibility that came with receiving such a gift. Staff Sergeant, I can't accept something this significant. You can and you will, Williams said firmly. Because Rodriguez told me to give it to someone who understood that weapons aren't just tools. They're extensions of the warrior who carries them. I've watched you work, Chen. You don't just maintain weapons. You understand them at a level that most people never achieve. This knife belongs with someone who will appreciate what it represents. The emotion in his voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, the words inadequate to express what she was feeling. Don't thank me, Williams replied. Earn it. Show those special operations instructors what a weapons expert looks like when she's given the chance to prove herself in the field. As evening watch rotation approached, Maya found herself alone in the armory for the first time since receiving her orders. The familiar space felt different now, charged with memory and possibility. These weapons that had been her companions for 6 years would soon be replaced by different tools, more advanced systems, specialized equipment designed for missions. She could barely imagine that she approached her workbench, where the M4 carbine from her demonstration still lay disassembled, its components arranged in the precise order that had become second nature to her. Without conscious thought, she began the reassembly process, her hands moving through the familiar sequence while her mind processed the day's revelations. 32 seconds. Her fastest time ever on this particular weapon, achieved while her thoughts were focused elsewhere. The irony wasn't lost on her as her conscious attention shifted toward an uncertain future, Her unconscious competence continued to evolve. Maya. She turned to find Torres standing in the armory entrance, her expression serious. I wanted to talk to you before the evening got away from us. Maya nodded, grateful for the interruption. Her own thoughts had been cycling through the same questions and fears for hours, and she desperately needed the perspective that only a friend could provide. Jennifer, do you think I'm making the right choice? Maya asked. Part of me thinks I should be satisfied with what I have here. I'm good at my job, I have friends, I'm building toward a secure future. Why risk all of that for something that might not work out? Torres was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. Can I ask you something? When you're working with these weapons, performing maintenance or diagnostics, or just handling them, how do you feel? Complete, Maya answered without hesitation. Like everything makes sense, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And when you're not working with weapons? When you're off duty, relaxing, trying to have a normal life? Maya considered the question, recognizing the uncomfortable truth it revealed. Restless. Like I'm waiting for something to start. That's your answer, Torres said gently. Maya, you're not meant for a normal life. You're meant for something extraordinary. This opportunity, it's not a risk. It's destiny finally catching up with what you've been preparing for all along. As the two women stood in the armory surrounded by the tools of Maya's obsession, she felt a moment of perfect clarity. The weapons around her weren't just equipment she maintained. They were instruments of possibility, keys to a future she had never dared to imagine, but had been unconsciously preparing for through years of relentless dedication. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new preparations for an assessment that would determine whether her hidden obsession could transform into something truly meaningful. But tonight, in the familiar sanctuary of the armory, Maya allowed herself to believe that she might be capable of more than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. The flight to Naval Air Station Coronado took place on a gray morning, when the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beneath scattered clouds, its surface reflecting the uncertain sky like hammered pewter. Maya pressed her face against the aircraft's small window, watching the California coastline emerge from the marine layer with the gradual revelation of a developing photograph. Somewhere below that expanse of beaches and training facilities, her future waited to be determined by standards she could only imagine. Her sea bag contained everything she owned that mattered. Uniforms pressed to regulation perfection. The combat knife Staff Sergeant Williams had given her, a small collection of technical manuals she had accumulated over the years, and a photograph of her parents taken at her high school graduation. The image showed them beaming with pride at their daughter's achievement, their faces radiating the kind of hope that came from believing their child would have opportunities they had never possessed. Maya wondered what they would think if they could see her now, flying toward an evaluation that might transform their studious daughter into something they couldn't comprehend. The aircraft's descent began as the pilot announced their approach to Coronado, and Maya felt her pulse quicken with a mixture of anticipation and terror that had become familiar over the past 2 weeks. The USS Leviathan had faded into memory like a half-remembered dream, replaced by a present reality that seemed too significant to be real. She was 24 years old, carrying 6 years of obsessive dedication toward a moment that would either validate everything she had worked for or reveal it as an elaborate delusion. Naval Air Station Coronado materialized beneath them with geometric precision, runways and buildings arranged in the orderly patterns that characterized military installations. Everywhere, but somehow more purposeful, more intense than anything Maya had experienced before. This was where legends were forged and dreams destroyed, where ordinary people either transcended their limitations or discovered that transcendence was beyond their reach. The passenger terminal buzzed with activity that felt different from normal. Military operations. The personnel moving through the space carried themselves with a particular kind of confidence, An economy of movement that spoke of capabilities earned through trials Maya could only imagine. These were people who had been tested in ways that most individuals never experienced, who had discovered reserves of strength and determination they hadn't known they possessed. Petty Officer Chen? Maya turned toward the voice, finding herself face to face with a petty officer first class, whose uniform displayed the distinctive special warfare insignia that marked him as part of an elite community she was hoping to join. He was perhaps 30 years old, with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent significant time in challenging environments, and his eyes held the alert intelligence that characterized people whose survival had depended on rapid assessment and decision-making. "Yes, Petty Officer," Maya replied, coming to attention automatically. "I'm Petty Officer Kane. I'll be your escort to the assessment facility." His voice carried traces of an accent she couldn't place, and his handshake was firm without being crushing. "Welcome to Coronado. Are you ready for what comes next?" The question carried implications that went far beyond polite conversation, and Maya sensed that her answer was being evaluated along with everything else about her presentation and demeanor. "As ready as I can be, Petty Officer Kane." He nodded approval and gestured toward the terminal exit. "Outstanding. Let's get you processed and oriented." The drive to the assessment facility took them through sections of the base that Maya had never seen in photographs or official publications. Training areas where small groups of personnel practiced movements that looked more like martial arts than military drill. Ranges where the sound of gunfire was constant but controlled, suggesting levels of weapons training that went far beyond basic marksmanship. Obstacle courses that seemed designed to test not just physical capability, but psychological resilience under stress. "First time at Coronado?" Kane asked as they passed a training area where instructors were putting candidates through exercises that looked like organized torture. "Yes, Petty Officer. I've been deployed aboard ship for the past 18 months. Ship duty," Kane mused. "Different world entirely. Structured, predictable, safe." He glanced at her with what might have been sympathy. "This is going to be unlike anything you've experienced before. The physical challenges are significant, but the mental demands are what break most people." Maya nodded, though she suspected that Kane's assessment of her psychological preparation was based on assumptions about her background that might not be accurate. Her years of self-imposed pressure in the armory had created their own form of mental conditioning, though she had no way of knowing whether that preparation would translate to the challenges she was about to face. The assessment facility was a complex of buildings that seemed designed to project both efficiency and intimidation. Personnel moved through the spaces with purposeful urgency, and Maya caught fragments of conversations that referenced training methods, candidate evaluations, and standards that meant nothing to her, but clearly carried significant weight for the people discussing them. Her processing began with medical examinations that were more thorough than anything she had experienced during her initial enlistment. Doctors and technicians measured, tested, and documented every aspect of her physical condition with the precision of scientists studying a rare specimen. Blood work, cardiovascular stress tests, flexibility assessments, reaction time measurements, all conducted with the understanding that the human body would be pushed beyond normal limitations and needed to be capable of responding appropriately. "Exceptional," one of the medical personnel commented, reviewing her test results. "Your cardiovascular efficiency is in the 95th percentile for your age group, and your stress response indicators suggest unusual resilience to physical and psychological pressure." Maya accepted the assessment without comment, though privately she wondered whether her years of self-imposed intensity had somehow conditioned her body along with her mind. The countless hours spent in focused concentration, the pressure she had placed on herself to achieve impossible standards, the way she had learned to function effectively while dealing with internal tension, perhaps all of that had been unconscious. Preparation for exactly this type of evaluation. The psychological assessment was more complex and significantly more invasive than anything she had anticipated. Teams of specialists conducted interviews, administered tests, and analyzed her responses with the thoroughness of people whose recommendations would influence decisions about substantial investments in training and development. They probed her motivations, her fear responses, her ability to function under pressure, and her commitment to objectives that might require personal sacrifice. "Tell me about your relationship with weapons," one of the psychologists said during a session that felt more like interrogation than evaluation. "Your file indicates an unusual level of dedication to weapons maintenance that goes far beyond professional requirements." Maya had practiced this explanation during the flight to Coronado, but sitting across from someone whose job was to identify psychological abnormalities made the words feel insufficient. "I find weapons systems intellectually satisfying," she began carefully. "They're complex mechanical puzzles that respond to understanding and attention. When I work on them, everything makes sense in a way that other activities don't. And you spend approximately 40 hours per week beyond your normal duties pursuing this satisfaction." "Yes, sir." Most people would describe that as obsessive behavior. How would you characterize it? Maya considered the question, recognizing that her answer might determine whether she was seen as dedicated or psychologically unstable. "I would characterize it as finding something I'm genuinely good at and pursuing excellence in that area. I don't think excellence happens by accident." The psychologist made notes that Maya couldn't read, his expression neutral but focused. "Have you ever considered that your dedication to weapons might indicate a predisposition toward violence or aggression?" The question hit her like a physical blow, not because it was unexpected, but because it revealed assumptions about her motivations that were fundamentally wrong. "Sir, I don't see weapons as instruments of violence. I see them as mechanical systems that deserve to be understood and maintained properly. My interest is in their function, not their destructive potential. But you understand that their primary function is to cause harm to other people? Their primary function is to project force when other methods of conflict resolution have failed." Maya replied, drawing on conversations she had heard among Marines and other personnel who actually carried weapons in operational environments. "They're tools that serve larger strategic objectives. My job is to ensure they function reliably when needed." The sessions continued for 3 days, each one probing different aspects of her psychology and motivation. Maya found herself discussing childhood experiences, family relationships, career goals, and personal fears with strangers who seemed capable of detecting deception through subtle changes in her voice or body language. The process was exhausting and invasive, but she sensed that her honesty was being evaluated along with her responses. The physical assessment began on the 4th day and immediately revealed that Maya's preparation had been woefully inadequate for what was expected. The instructors, all of them carrying the special warfare insignia that marked them as graduates of programs she was trying to enter, put her through exercises that tested strength, endurance, flexibility, and pain tolerance in ways that seemed designed to identify her breaking point. Swimming in full gear through surf that threatened to drown her every few minutes. Obstacle courses that required her to overcome not just physical barriers, but psychological resistance to heights, confined spaces, and controlled violence. Endurance runs that continued until she was functioning on pure determination rather than physical capability. "Pain is weakness leaving the body," one of the instructors shouted as Maya struggled through an exercise that felt specifically designed to cause maximum discomfort. "Show me what you're made of, Chun." But it was during the weapons assessment that Maya finally felt her confidence return. The range complex at Coronado was unlike anything she had seen before. Facilities designed to test not just marksmanship but combat effectiveness under conditions that simulated actual operational stress. Multiple weapon systems, moving targets, time constraints, and scenarios that required tactical decision-making along with technical proficiency. You'll be evaluated on speed, accuracy, adaptability, and decision-making, the range instructor explained as Maya examined the weapons she would be using. These aren't the weapons you're familiar with from ship duty. These are combat configurations with modifications specific to special operations requirements. Maya nodded, studying the array of firearms before her. Modified M4 carbines with specialized optics and accessories. Precision rifles configured for long-range accuracy. Pistols with custom triggers and enhanced reliability features. Each weapon represented thousands of hours of development and refinement by people who understood that mechanical perfection could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The first exercise was basic weapons handling disassembly, inspection, and reassembly under time pressure, while instructors created distractions designed to break her concentration. Maya approached the unfamiliar weapons with the same methodical intensity she had applied to every mechanical challenge she had ever encountered, her hands reading the component surfaces and relationships while her mind cataloged the modifications and their implications for performance. 3 minutes, 47 seconds for complete disassembly and reassembly of a heavily modified M4 carbine she had never seen before. The instructor checked his stopwatch twice, as if the reading couldn't be accurate. Outstanding,